So first, what you need is the belief. You don't even know how, you have to know how to get there. You don't even have to love yourself. You don't even have to, you can be as miserable as you, and as I was so stuck and miserable, Jay. I had no self-love, no self-compassion. You just have to make that intention, that commitment, and you have to believe that there's something more for you, because there absolutely is.
Welcome to Inspire Me with Jay. This is a podcast to inspire, uplift, show forth the love of God, and help usher in the spiritual awakening. Welcome to Inspire Me with Jay. Holly, why don't you introduce yourself?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, my name's Holly McNeil. I'm the creator of the P.E.R.L.O.V.E mindfulness and meditation practices. And, Jay and I talked beforehand, and sometimes sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you start to make some change. So, yeah, we're going to get into how they were created. It's a straightforward set of practices that can take you from stuck and isolated to wherever you want to go. And it's been a wonderful journey. So thank you for having me on to share that with you today.
So what was your transformation? You said you went through a whole bunch of life-threatening events, but then at a point you decided to turn your life around.
Yeah. Sometimes there's the near-death experience. It's kind of like this huge thing later on in life, but sometimes things are more subtle. When one of my earliest memories is being at the beach, boating with my family in South Dakota, in the Black Hills of South Dakota, when I was 4. And at the end of the boating, I jumped out of the water, and it was too deep for me. I couldn't touch the ground. So I was 4. My sister, who's 5.5, jumped out with me to try to save me, but quickly realized she couldn't save herself. So she pushed me down to save herself. And so at 4 years old, with my eyes open, her hands on my shoulders, all I could see was her struggling. And, at that moment, I had no idea if I was going to live or die. And then I opened my eyes and I saw her body go up, and I just grabbed on. And my father had seen us and pulled us out of the water, when you're 4, you really don't realize what that's doing to you. And then the next year, when I was 5, in the Black Hills of South Dakota, experienced the worst flash flood in the history of the United States. And 273 people, or 38 people, died that day. And my family was living right on the creek. And so it was a really scary time for us. But if you would ask me what the biggest tragedy of my childhood was, it wouldn't be the near drowning at the lake or the flood. But certainly those things shake you up, right? There wouldn't be a storm that I wouldn't be afraid, or, you lose that sense of security, right? It's such a shame when you're a child in those formative years that you don't really understand what's going on. But still, I wouldn't call that the worst thing in my childhood. The worst thing that happened to me is when I heard my mother crying in the laundry room, and I went in to ask her what was wrong. And she replied without a moment's hesitation, "Your father doesn't love us anymore. He wants a divorce." And, for somebody who was already so shaken, that was it for me. My world shattered after that. This person, the one who had saved my life, the one who was always there for me, is now gone and doesn't love me anymore. And so from then on, I went downhill. Everything just spiraled downhill without really even knowing it. There was a lot of abuse and adversity and other life-threatening things that happened. But what I did, because what I started to sense was that it was my fault, right? But I was unlovable and unworthy. So I started to create this perfect world to hide these flaws. Even though really I had nothing to do with it, I started to create this perfect world to hide, my imperfections. And on the outside, Jay, I had everything. I had my career was flourishing. I'm an architect. I had a handsome husband. We built a beautiful home. We had 2 lovely children, nice car, great friends, right down to the perfect pets. But the foundation of my life was flawed. And at age 34, all of that caught up with me. all of it caught up with me, and it just imploded. It just imploded. You know, there was all the illness, all the anxiety, and it was a super, super low point. I just remember crying on the toilet in the middle of the night, and I was just praying to God, life, Buddha, anyone out there, anyone. You know, this is actually the lowest point of my, even though it looked amazing, it was at my lowest point of my unhappy, self-absorbed, anxiety-filled life. I vowed to do better. Give me a second chance and I will change. So I was given that second chance. With my karmic debt in tow, I went out to make good on that vow. Right. And this wouldn't be easy. It would first catapult me out of a mutually manipulative and controlling marriage and into an 8-year battle for my children. And I had very little back then, but it took everything I had to prevent my alienation from them. When I was younger, my mother alienated my father from us. And I know what that does to a child's self-esteem and self-worth. But it took those 8 years for me to really start to look at things and to realize the importance of others in life. But in making this vow and keeping it, I tripped upon this amazing spiritual path, one that started giving me answers when I needed it. Even though I didn't know what I was looking for at the time, my vow was to do better. It started giving me the right people, situations, and events to help me along my way. And so it would take me from my hometown in the Black Hills of South Dakota to Minneapolis and beyond. I read books. I listened to teachings. I attended retreats. I practiced Buddhism for 5 years. Before at age 49, once again, packing up everything I had, leaving everyone I knew to move across the country and live in a Dharma house in San Francisco. But in my early 40s, this was a 20-year journey, 20 years from the time I made my vow, right around 9/11. But in my early 40s, about 10 years into it, I realized that I had something to say, that something was coming around. So I put 2 intentions out to the world. The first was to retire before I turned 50 from architecture, even though I was doing really well in a large firm as associate principal. And the second was to have the time and space to write about what I thought I knew back then. So as intentions go, I retired 2 days before I turned 50, and in 2017, I sat down to write. But it wouldn't be until the COVID pandemic, when we're all sequestered in our homes, that I would be looking. I printed out a book proposal for a book I was writing, and I would be looking at the pages, and just looking over at the pages, I could see it. It was like the lights came on. I could see this straightforward set of mindfulness and meditation practices that had been my journey, right? And I had taken a very circuitous route, the long way around. It took me 20 years. So my goal now is to share these practices, this kind of shortcut from the small and isolated to the infinite, with as many people as I can with the time I have left, in this life. So that's kind of my story.
So, like, over the last 20 years, what kind of things had you discovered along the way that helped you change?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was completely amazing. The first book that showed up, I was across the state of South Dakota on a business trip in Sioux Falls. And the first book that showed up, I just walked into a Barnes & Noble. And the book was Stand Up for Your Life by Cheryl Richardson. And in the book, at the introduction, she says, be careful what you ask for, because you will rock the boat, right? When you ask for change, if you keep an intention and you believe that you believe in your will to keep that intention, and you keep it going, things will show up. And you don't even have to know how to get there. But in the introductory to this book, it said, you will rock the boat, right? But life will send you the right people, events, and situations to help you along your way. So it started with that book. The second book that showed up was Dr. Wayne Dyer's There's a Spiritual Solution for Every Problem. Also, then Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life. All this time is during this time when I'm reading these books, you have to remember I'm in Black Hills of South Dakota. And actually in 2004, the first time in a long time that a Buddhist monk came to Rapid City. I went to a weekend retreat there. But during this time, I'm battling with, for my children and for their self-worth, knowing that I cannot be alienated from them because I know what it did to them. So it was all a very difficult time. But every time I had a question, that book, whatever book I was reading, was the answer. And it was amazing. And it continued to go that way. I read Pema Chodron's Start Where You Are, The Power of Now. You can be happy no matter what. And so then I wanted more, right? And so I decided to, after 8 years, my children came to me and said, Mom, we're going on vacation with Dad and we're not coming back. And I knew that holding on to your children at that time, they're 13 and 15, could potentially meaning them having to testify against me in court, and I couldn't do that to them, right? So something told me I had done enough. But basically, I was a childless mother in South Dakota, wanting to do more with my spiritual journey. So I decided that if I couldn't be there for my children, I was basically alienated completely from them for about 4 months, about a year and a half. Seeing them rarely. I stayed, I kept trying for a year and a half, but I decided that if I couldn't be there for them, that I would live by example. So I moved to Minneapolis. I did the John Kabat-Zinn 8-week mindfulness-based meditation study. I went to Zen Buddhism. There's other common grounds and other Buddhist teachings that I listened to. Again, keeping reading. And in 2009, I was working in Minneapolis. I started writing about what I was learning. And it's been a combination of neuroscience, psychology, spirituality, Buddhism, Christianity. It's throughout all of the journey, everything seemed to be pointing back to a few simple truths. But again, in Minneapolis, I wanted more. And so I moved once again to the greater New York City area, where I started practicing Buddhism for 5 years there. And the timing of everything, Jay, was just completely amazing. Like, I had just found a meditation class. I Googled meditation close to my work, and it was a mile away. And I found this Buddhist tradition, and the second time I was in class, someone else had asked, is there a deeper study? And the teacher said, you know what, we just finished a 5-year book study, and we're starting a new one in 2 weeks on the new Heart of Wisdom, which is all about emptiness and enlightenment. And so for 2 years, twice a week, I went and studied that book. And in fact, halfway through that is when I moved from New York to San Francisco, and it's the same tradition, and they happen to be studying the same book almost on the same page. And these kind of things has happened to me and continue to happen over and over and over and over again. And I think that it's available to anyone who really can put an intention out there. And again, you don't have to know how you're going to get there, because when I started my journey, I was so lost and so stuck but you just have to believe that you can get there, and then be aware and watch for things that show up in your life. So it's just been, even to this day, it's a continual, like being on this podcast, it's a continual journey of things showing up that I need to share this information. It's been fabulous. I wouldn't want my life, I wouldn't want it for anyone, but I have no regrets. I have regrets of putting my children in the middle, of course, of the struggle, but I have no regrets, and I'm just very grateful for where I'm at today.
Are you looking for a devotional that will radically transform your walk with Christ and revolutionize the world at the same time? Check out my latest book, Walk as Children of the Light. This book focuses on everything you need to be fully equipped and discipled in Christ: prayer, meditation, scripture, love, gratitude, and much, much more. Available on Amazon, 5-star rating.
The truths, yes.
That you learned.
Right, the truths that we learned. Okay, so we have between 6,000 and 70,000 thoughts a day, each one of us. 80% of those thoughts are negative and 95% repeat. And from those negative thoughts come our emotions and feelings. And though most negative self-talk is misguided and disruptive, we tend to accept it as truth, and with it create our lives. And so I call these thoughts, emotions, and feelings, this TEF, right? Thoughts, emotions, and feelings, you're the happiness thief, right? Because without awareness, we let that programming from very early on, I'm unhappy, I'm unlovable, we let that, we live from that point, right? Without awareness. But the few simple truths are these. From millennial old wisdom to modern day teachings, it just blows me away from neuroscience to, like I said, to psychology, to spirituality, Buddhism, Christianity. They all point back to the fact that we are not our thoughts, emotions, and feelings. We are not our TEF, that we're so much more than that. So when we continually have negative thoughts without awareness, according to Dr. Joe Dispenza, we have nerve cells that fire together, wire together. So when we continually think about something, we create a neural net of long-term relationships of anger or hurt or love or whatever it is. And without awareness, we live from those relationships. But if you unravel that, if you pull that apart, right, it actually has no center. There's no bandit there, right? If we don't engage with our negative thoughts, emotions, and feelings, this neural net has no choice but to fall apart. And when we do that, when we do recognize that TEF, and we can see it from a distance, and we can respond to it with wisdom, then there's space for these aha moments to come through, moments of peace and understanding, and really it's the door, bring you to the door of self-exploration. So the biggest truth is that we are not our thoughts, emotions, and feelings, that we are so much more than that. And that the mind is a tool for us to use, and rather than to be kind of enmeshed in and stuck within. So,
Well, is it sort of like most of our life is essentially perception and focus? Like if you perceive yourself a certain way and then you focus on it, that's how you feel. And that affects how you live. So if you're in a negative state and that's what your perception is, that's what you focus on, that's how
yes,
you
that's
feel,
absolutely, that's
But it's like
exact.
it's
Yes,
stepping out of that.
that's exactly right, and that's exactly what we're talking about here. That without awareness, we live through our conditioning, right? And these conditioned behaviors, even from birth, we've been ambushed by these negative thoughts, emotions, and feelings. Without awareness, we've created them into patterns and defaults and habits that we live by. In fact, the mind actually protects that programming as a survival mechanism. So even when we go to change it, it's really going to circumvent you and take you back to those old patterns. So that's really what P.E.R.L.O.V.E is all about. It's a path to the first three practices: pledge, evaluate, recognize, is about training the mind, because training the mind matters, right? Training the mind matters. There's nothing more important. Controlling your outside world is not nearly as important as understanding and creating from the inside, because we do create our lives from what's inside. If we have a negative mind, we see a negative world. If we have a positive mind, we see a positive world. And so pledge, evaluate, recognize, those three practices are about training the mind, right? And we can go through those individually. And then locate, vote, open, vest, and expand then is about exploring what remains when the TEF is removed, exploring that space, that clarity, that awareness, that wisdom that comes through authentic silence, through meditation. And so what I found in teaching these practices is that the biggest kind of missing link has been from stuck to the door of exploration, right? So people, if you're not familiar with something, if you don't know it, you literally can't see it. It's like the story of Columbus's ships, right? When the native people first saw the ships on the horizon, they couldn't see the ships because there wasn't a pattern in their brain that matched it. So often we're living from a place where we can't see anything past our own thoughts, emotions, and feelings. And so the first three, I found in teaching that the first three practices are kind of the biggest missing link. And like I said, Jay, I'm an architect. I've done large hospital work nationally and internationally. And so my gift is clarity, is putting like a big puzzle together. So nothing in these practices isn't something that I've learned from at least one, if not several teachers, different books and different philosophies, all pointing back to the same thing. So it's very powerful, and I'm very excited to be able to share it with people.
So you had pledge, evaluate, and is it
Recognize.
reprogram or something?
Recognize. Yeah,
Recognize.
recognize.
So like, what is
right.
the first element?
So pledge, right? So you're going to pledge. First of all, you pledge an intention that you want this to work, and you stick with that intention. But you start with 6 minutes a day. The whole thing starts with pledging 1 minute 6 times a day. 1 minute 6 times a day to watch your mind. Right? If we have all these thoughts going on in our head, we want to create a habit of watching our mind. So people ask me, is 1 minute 6 times a day enough time? Well, what I say to people is one of the most important things you can understand about training the mind is this. If you want to change something, if you want to learn something, if you want to make it a habit, you must do it over and over and over and over again. Okay. So the whole idea of doing it 1 minute 6 times a day is that eventually, if you do something long enough, it will start to happen automatically. It will start to become a habit. And that's exactly what a habit is, something that happens automatically without you even needing to pay attention. So it takes 3 times to even understand something, 8 times to really let it sink in, or 21 days to make something a habit. So if there's something you want to change, I recommend you listen to it, over and over again. So if you do this 1 minute 6 times a day, you just stop, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and just watch your mind, right? You're not judging your thoughts. You're not trying to push them away. You're just learning to pay attention. If you do this 1 minute 6 times a day for 3 weeks, you will notice that you start to do it. You start to watch your mind automatically. So you start with 1 minute 6 times a day. The goal is to make this a 24/7 thing where you have gained awareness. So once you have established this habit in pledge, you've pledged this time, you've done it, you now have a habit of watching your mind. And that's what's powerful. And that's what brings you to the next step, which I can go on to the next step if you'd like.
Yeah, which is evaluate.
Evaluate, right. So there's the poem by Robert Blythe, and there was a CD by John Kabat-Zinn that was given to me 10 years into my journey, and even before my Buddhist study, I knew how important it was to listen to things over and over and over again. And so I listened to this CD over and over and over and over again. I memorized it, I transcribed it at one point, and then I lost it, unfortunately, and it was pirated. So sorry, John. And so I can't even find it to tell you what it is. So if anyone knows John Kabat-Zinn, please tell him I'm trying to figure out what this is. I can recite it. I just don't have a title for it. But anyway, in that CD, John Kabat-Zinn very eloquently transcribes a poem by Robert Blythe, the late activist and writer, called "The Long Black Bag We Drag Behind Us." And in it, it says that when we're little and people don't like things about us, good girls don't do that, good boys don't behave that way, or, if your parents get divorced or whatever, you're unsure about it, you start to doubt and reject parts of yourself, and you shove them in this bag. And as you get older, you continue to shove parts of yourself that you think aren't acceptable, that are flawed, and you want to hide from others. You continue to shove those in the bag. And then as you get in time, though the bag is long and heavy, full of all those parts that you don't want to look at or show others, you, and forget they're yourself, you're actually creating from those bags, because, we've forgotten what's in there, but the happiness thief does not forget. The happiness thief lives in this bag, right? And so it's using all of this negativity to spew stuff out at you all the time. Your entire emotions are when your thoughts have sent chemicals into your body So if you've had negative or anxious thoughts for years, your entire body, every cell in your body has thousands of receptors, and it's shouting this stuff back at you, right? So you've kind of pushed this away, not wanting to think about it, yet you're creating your life from it. So in evaluate, what we do is we look in the bag, right? We look for what's any theft we've been creating from, but it's been flying under the radar. And this can be scary because it takes courage and also accountability to look at what you've created and to take responsibility for it. I mean, we're obviously, when we're young, we're not responsible for those things that happen to us. But as we grow older, we become responsible for how we react to it. So it's okay to look in the bag slowly, right? And trauma is stuff that and near-death experiences, things that really frighten you, or things that you've shoved furthest down in the bag. Right? So in evaluate, you start to, when you're watching your mind, right, and you see these patterns come up, right, of negativity or whatever, you're starting to look as, you know, what is causing, what is it that's coming up? You're starting to recognize these thoughts, emotions, and feelings and evaluate, right? And you can start with the easier ones like procrastination, or, you know, when you procrastinate, you might have thoughts of, I'm not good enough, I'll never get it done, I'll do it later, right? And so evaluate, where pledge is one and done, evaluate, you go back in layers, right? Because it's actually the hardest part of the formula, to kind of really honestly look at that. Now, you don't want to stay enmeshed in it, because you're already enmeshed in it if you're living from it. You're just trying to recognize it. So that when you get to R, recognize, where it all comes together, you can recognize these patterns as they come up in your daily life, right? So you've pledged to make a pattern of watching our mind. We've evaluated a few targets and identified a few targets for change. And then in recognize, we recognize them as they come up in our daily lives. And if we didn't take our negative patterns so seriously, so there's two ways in recognize, okay? There's the direct way to recognize, P plus E equals R, A plus B equals C. And there's the indirect way to recognize, which I'll talk about in a minute. And if we didn't take our negative patterns so seriously, the direct way would be all we would need, right? You could be like, okay, I've talked to you, stinky little piece of crap. I see you, right? And when you see it, then what do you do with it, right? You welcome it. You have it sit next to you. You release it. You yield to it. You do anything but attach to it, right? You're wanting to recognize it as something that comes up, and without attachment, it will disappear. If you don't attach to it, it will disappear, right? It will go back. It's like a wave, right? And like I said, if we weren't so locked and stuck and can't see beyond our thoughts, the direct way would be all we would need. But fortunately for us, we do have the indirect way to recognize, which is this. Okay, this is one of the other important things. If you only take a few things away from today, the first one is to, repeat things over and over and over. The second thing is this: acting in ways contrary to your patterns aids in bringing the happiness thief out of hiding. So what does this even mean? This means basically doing anything that's not crappy or negative, right? Because what happens is when you start to use compassion, or when you start to practice self-love, or things that we are so hard on ourselves, right? When you start to practice gratitude, or when you start to meditate. Meditation means in Tibetan to become familiar with your mind. That's actually what meditation means. When you start to do these things, it's like in your brain, it's like your brain has this, your happiness thief is going along spewing all this stuff at you from all these negative patterns, and all of a sudden you throw in some compassion or self-love, and your brain's like, does not compute, right? It starts to break down those patterns, those negative patterns, and the neural net starts to disband, and there's spaces for those aha moments to come through, right? And so you start to see your TEF from a distance, right? Because when you spend a lot of time over and over and over again in gratitude, or just in walking out in nature, right? That does not compute with the patterns in your brain. And at first you're going to meet with resistance, because the happiness thief is not going down without a fight, okay? Your patterns are by survival mode, your brain is kind of set up to protect its programming. Okay. So you're going to meet with resistance, and this is, you might fall away from it for a while, but that's why it's important to keep coming back to it. But when you do it enough, you start to create space between you and your thoughts, emotions, and feelings. You want to think of it like a thoughts, emotions, and feelings highway, right? With all the horn honking and yelling and screaming and conditioning. You want to be sitting by your easy chair next to the highway, watching it all go by. Okay? And the more often you can do these positive things, gratitude, kindness, helping others, the more often you're going to be sitting in that easy chair, and you can see this stuff as it's happening, as it's arising, and then that allows you to respond to it with wisdom, right? And the more often you do that, the more space, awareness you build, the more space you create, right, to hold this stuff when it comes up, right? And so instead of being enmeshed in it, if you can imagine it, you're meshed in over here, right? You create some distance from it, and you can hold it in your awareness, seeing it as it comes up. And that is what takes you to the door of self-exploration, because once you can recognize your thoughts, emotions, and feelings, you can respond to them with wisdom, they start to lose their power over you. You start to create freedom and awareness that brings you to the door of self-exploration. So that is, in a nutshell, right, the practice of PER. But you must do them over and over and over. Very simple, very straightforward, but it must be repeated. Right? And then when you do see those layers, when you do respond to them with wisdom, it also helps you to see the next few layers in your bag. Right.
So, I mean, one thing to start with is to focus on the fact that though I'm not perfect, my heart and my mind are wanting to point towards love, and that is
yes,
my ultimate desire, and then I'm in a good
yeah,
place. Because at least if you have a heart towards love, even if you stumble and fall and whatever, if
right.
you genuinely have a heart towards love, you're in a good place.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, it's just a lot of people can't see that. They might want to have that heart towards love, but they just need to believe that it's there. Believe that their true nature is that their true nature is peaceful and calm and wise, right? And so when we get to V, invest, right? One of the things I talked about is you need to vest in the obstacles that show up in your life, because your universal, your spiritual self, your soul is trying, in every person, place, or thing, every event in your life, it's showing you what you need to set yourself free, right? So first, what you need is the belief. You don't even know how, you have to know how to get there. You don't even have to love yourself. You don't even have to, you can be as miserable as you, and as I was so stuck and miserable, Jay. I had no self-love, no self-compassion. You just have to make that intention, that commitment, and you have to believe that there's something more for you, because there absolutely is. Yes. It's wonderful.
So in terms of like your meditation work, um, do you actually teach meditation, don't you? And you incorporate all of these teachings into your
Right.
meditation work.
Right. So I'm a mindfulness and meditation coach, right? And the P.E.R.L.O.V.E practices are more mindfulness based, okay? Because you need to create that space, right? And definitely we use meditation the 1 minute 6 times a day. So the first 2 practices are more mindfulness based. But when you get to love, right, you locate that space that remains when the teff is removed, right? That authentic silence. Use that as an object of meditation. So when you get to love, and this formula is designed that you can start actually anywhere you want, and you can go back and forth, but you use that as an object of meditation, right? And you notice that space, it might be, you might notice for the first time that it's movable, that it's expandable beyond your body and mind. But you then use it to drop from your head to your heart. So you locate locate the space, drop from your head to your heart, because it said that in many teachings that's where the true nature of your is, in your heart, not in your head. And then you open your heart using your power of imagination. Now, the power of imagination is highly underutilized, we don't believe what we imagine becomes real, but it actually does. So in meditation, you just imagine your heart opening over and over and over. And at first, you're not going to feel anything. It's going to feel like you have to imagine your heart as a muscle that's atrophied under all this thoughts, emotions, and feelings. So the meditation is really about becoming, like I said, the word meditation means to become familiar with what is already there, right? So first you're becoming familiar with your thoughts, and then in love, you're opening your heart. And as you practice opening your heart, you believe, you can open it. You can actually feel, you have physical sensations in your body, and you open, and this amazing flow of energy comes through when you open your heart. And then you invest in what you find there. Okay. So what invest? So invest time in meditation in an open heart, just spending time in that unconditional love, universal compassion, and infinite wisdom that comes from the flow of an open heart. So to answer your question, often more meditation comes in love. But best also, like I said, means to take responsibility for the obstacles that come up in your life. Because, like I said, your spiritual, your soul, your love, your universal self is showing you in every person, place, or thing what you need to set yourself free. Finally, we get to the last E in P.E.R.L.O.V.E, expanding beyond our conditioned limits. And in the end, we find that finding happiness might be much more subtle than we expect when a slight shift in perspective occurs and we realize that we and the world around us are one and the same. And I have a class that is free to anyone that signs up for my newsletter called the Perloveformula to Happiness. And what I mean by that is that happiness, we define, a lot of Western society defines happiness as, if I can get that car, if I can get that job, if only this guy will call me back, wanting this feeling of elation. But life is messy, right? No matter your situation, your economic situation, your gender, your identification, your economic location, whatever, life is messy. And so happiness is to be able to live in that place of peace, in that flow, in that kind of 24/7 meditative awareness, where no matter what's happening on the outside, be it pleasant or unpleasant, joyful or sad, you continue to stay in that place of peace and calm. So my meditation hasn't been as, people say you should meditate, and the whole point is to help people understand why they're meditating. Right? First, to become familiar with their mind, with the thoughts that are filling their mind, then to clear those thoughts up and explore that space, which contains their wisdom and true nature.
I spent several years of my life stressed, anxious, and depressed. I needed to find something that would make my life work. For me, that was meditation. With meditation, I found the peace of mind that I was looking for. I found the happiness, and I found a way to improve every area of my life, my emotional life, my spiritual life, my relationships. I was able to discover things about myself. I can give you the tools to meditate. I will walk you through the process and hold your hand. Whether you're a beginner to meditation who's never meditated, or whether you're someone who's tried meditation and it just never seemed to work, we can make it work. Meditation is something that everyone can do, and I can show you how. Check out my course on meditation. With opening up your heart, could you use visualization, like you see flowers or something beautiful flowing out from within your heart,
Yeah.
or
Yes,
something like
yes,
that?
absolutely. Any kind of imagination. I remember I was sitting at a temple in Arizona and just imagining it opening, but it's like a waterfall, right? That overflows when it gets enough water, or a light, right? You can imagine the light coming out, breaking through, right? So absolutely, any kind of pleasant imagery. You are in control. You're in charge of your mind, and your mind is strictly a tool to help you explore life, this human condition, this human journey that we're on. So yeah, that absolutely works. And when you can actually just imagine it opening and just shining infinitely, and just a peaceful white light, or in a peaceful meadow, in the openness of a meadow, or yeah, an opening flower, right? And it works, and you'll actually feel like physical sensations in your body, because your body is so connected to your mind in many, many ways. And when you start again to reprogram your body with these positive beliefs and these patterns, your body, your mind, your body starts to change as well. When you start sending those new chemicals into your body. I've been very anxious for years, and I've had stomach problems for years, right? And I'm just recently working on, self-compassion, and having that response in my stomach be one of love and self-compassion. And you can actually make those changes in your body. And so, yeah, absolutely. Your power of imagination is huge, right? We are very powerful beings, and we don't realize that when we're so lost and stuck in our thoughts. So you teach meditation as
Is there
well,
also a
right, Jason? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I do. So is there also a part like we recognize our own programming, but do sometimes we look to the next level? Like if you had an emotionally abusive parent, you start to recognize their programming and that they were responding to you in response to their own programming. And then your perception of them changes that if they didn't have that programming, their perception of you would probably have been radically different.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is why, forgiveness is huge, and compassion for others. When you start to find this space and this clarity, and a lot of the wisdom that comes through is that, the wisdom of compassion for others and other situations. And, when I talk to people about this, they're like, why weren't we taught this stuff when we were young, right? Why weren't we taught about the power of the mind and the power to watch our thoughts and to respond to them wisely? It's because, yeah, we have parents that had their own situations, their own traumas, right? And so it is the kind of charge, I guess, from generation to generation to try to break those patterns, right? And without blame, without anytime you're blaming, and you've got this victim mindset, that's just a mindset that's going to keep you stuck, right? Your mindset is everything. Whatever mindset you have going on is what creates your life. So if you can, like you said, if you can understand from a place of compassion what's how their patterns came about, you can definitely find that forgiveness, and then be the change you want to see, right? And be the change you want to see in yourself. Teach it to your children. I mean, it would be just wonderful if someday people were able to teach this to their children. Could you imagine the evolution of humanity if we started to really utilize the power of our minds to find our inner wisdom and compassion? Yeah.
Like, what's a way to start doing it? Because a lot of people may have young children. What would you tell them to start with young children, teaching them that they're not a victim of their thoughts or perceptions, that they can actually take control of how they feel
Yeah.
and things like that. But what are
Yeah.
some good things to teach them?
Well, there's some good books, obviously, well, for adults to read. But even like Louise Hay's "You Can Heal Your Life," right? There's a lot of great affirmations in that book, that I am whole, I am whole and complete just as I am. So just having them start to create those patterns will help them to understand and create positive patterns in their lives, right? And then you can certainly talk to them if you have this understanding and clarity. You can certainly talk to them. You are not your thoughts, emotions, and feelings, right? You can teach them, however far you want to go. But I would say for young children, really just starting with these positive books, and when something happens, to understand, if something happens at school, to help them understand why that's happening, right? Why that other child might have acted that way. Yeah, even to have a class, and to be honest, I haven't thought totally about what the class curriculum would look like in like an elementary school, but you could absolutely have a class And there are many teachers that you could draw from, like I said, from all the different not typologies, I can't come up with the word, but from psychology and from neuroscience. There are many people. Yeah, you could definitely have. That would be a wonderful thing if people could start teaching this in school.
So you obviously teach from mindfulness, and did you sort of craft your specific program, tailoring it, but coming out of mindfulness?
Yeah. So if anyone who signs up for my newsletter, I'll send them a link. You get a link to the 1-hour class. It goes through each practices and the teachings behind it. And then I have a perfect practice forum every month. It's a very low cost, but we go through in different modules, P, E, and R. We go look from the inside out, the outside in, the simple and obvious, why it's not so simple and obvious, and the middle way are the 4 modules that we teach from. But I tell you what, Jay, every time I've been teaching this class for about a year now, and I'm like, I don't know, what am I going to teach? I have no idea, right? But it's that when you quiet your mind in that authentic silence, and I can feel it in my throat right now, that wisdom comes through, right? Early in the morning, it just came through, and I literally had to get up on my phone and write it down. I would forget it. So that wisdom came through to teach these classes. So yeah, I have a year-long kind of course that I hope to start teaching, in weekend courses at some point. But these types of teachings, and again, the P.E.R.L.O.V.E is a culmination of many teachings from millennial wisdom to modern day teachings. And so there are other great paths out there, but like I said, the ones that point back to the same idea. And so yeah, I do have a course I teach about it. And this is just, it came about, P.E.R.L.O.V.E, that practices came about in October of 21. I started teaching them online a year ago in January. And again, I needed a place to start teaching them, right? So this is one of those things that just showed up. And these 2 young women in San Francisco, created a platform called Rebel for women over 50. And it was this great free platform, and I was able to teach the class, and I taught it 2 or 3 times a month, and I was able to refine my work and get feedback from them. And then like a year and a half later, the platform closed down, right? But it was there exactly for me when I needed it as an incubator for these teachings. And so at this point, I've got this forum going. I'm going to be speaking I'm speaking at a mindfulness expo next month. But it is my goal and I'm fortunate enough to have the time and space to try to get these types of teachings, if not these teachings, out there, so that, when I'm gone, or, and there's many teachers, obviously, Michael Singer and John Kabat-Zinn, and Dr. Joe Dispenza is big about this right now, but do as much as I can to get these type of teachings out there and available to people.
Please like, subscribe to this channel, and share everywhere. Thank you. So do you think there's like a spiritual awakening that's going on, and that meditation is a big component of what's happening, that people are starting to look to something larger than what we see around them? Because it seems like a lot of the things we trusted, whether it's the government or the media, it's kind of just, they're not really what we thought they were. They're not, anything we can really look towards for deeper peace.
I've heard a lot of people say that there's a movement coming on, that there's this kind of general awakening happening, which, I love to believe, but it's really up to each individual, right? If we believe that's happening, and enough people believe that's happening, then that will happen, right? There's certainly many, many people that are very, not in that way, right? But it's those people, you're going to speak most to those people that believe that it's happening, right? We are a collective consciousness in that way. There was a study done in Washington, D.C. one summer, where they all had these meditators sit on the main lawn. And many other studies had been done before that. And so they said, well, crime rate's going to go down by 25% this year. And the police chief is like, no, there's no way, not unless we get 2 feet of snow. And all these meditators went and sat on the lawn, and indeed, crime rate went down by 25% that summer. And so if enough people start to believe, not they don't even have to know we're going to get there, but if enough people start to believe that this is an awakening, there's something bigger happening here, then it will happen. We create our worlds. So I hope it does. I mean, I'm on board.
So
I'm in.
well, I mean, the thing is, so if what we believe happens and we shape it, it's like we might as well believe something positive and collectively try to put
Absolutely.
something positive out there and go from
That's
there.
absolutely that's absolutely right. And so there's been a group of people I've talked to as I guest on podcasts that are doing the same thing that you are. And it's only when we're unaware that we are doing negative things by default, right? We don't want to be negative. People don't want to be angry. They just don't think there's anything else because if they're so enmeshed in that neural net that they can't see beyond it, right? They can't see the ships on the horizon, right? So at first, we're only going to be able to get to those
Mhm.
people that want to see, right? And yes, absolutely. Let's do something positive. Let's make a change. And who knows? Maybe then it'll start to. The more people hear about it, the more they might start to kind of loosen up their neural net and be able to see that there might be more than whatever the stuck life that they're living. So we can only hope. And one of the practices, there's a practice of when you just breathe in kind of everyone else's struggle and you just try to breathe out to everyone, just on a subconscious level, you try to breathe out to everyone compassion and understanding, and if enough people do that, definitely it can absolutely be a change together for sure. And count me in.
Well, I kind of wonder, it's fear. Yeah, I know fear controls so much of us as individuals, but you can kind of see it collectively because, it's like
Yeah.
when you see what people are talking about on social media and you see what's in the news, it's always negative and people are saying,
Oh,
well, it's
absolutely.
bad now and it's going to get worse, and they go into this whole
Right.
story about how everything's horrible, and it's like,
Right.
well, if you've been around long enough, seem like there's always somebody, like go back to the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s. It's bad now, but this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And somehow it just never quite seems to go to the level that they're talking about, and things kind of pull out and people move on. But it's like we have this fear-based mentality
We
that
do. We
creates
do.
so much of our worry and strife. And it's like, well, what if
Right.
we just change the programming and just in a
Yeah.
different direction?
Right. No, right. It's very simple and straightforward, right? It's very simple. It's exactly right. We have all this negative, and because people we see negative stuff on the news, we think negative stuff. We're gonna have a negative world. Absolutely. We just basically, you're right. It's like just change the programming, we'll be good. But again, the mind will protect its old programming, so you will meet with resistance. And so it takes determination. And again, and often, like in your podcast, it takes near death experiences. It takes hitting a super low point before people think there's got to be something better than this. And the mind will protect its programming. It's kind of a survival mechanism that it will circumvent whatever you're trying to do and take you back to the old programming. So it absolutely takes determination, which is why you must do something. If there's something like if someone's listening to this podcast today and it speaks to them, listen to it 15 times. Okay. Or get my class and listen to it 15 times. Or if there's a CD, or read The Untethered Soul 15 times, right? You have to do it over and over and over again so that you start to rewire the brain. It doesn't take a lot of time. It's not hard. It just takes your attention, and you must repeat it. You must keep repeating it. So,
Yeah, and you had said at one point about meditation is for self-exploration, and it seems kind of like that when you meditate, for a significant period of time, 30, 40 minutes or whatever, that eventually you get into self-exploration, even if you're not
right.
intending to it, because you can do positive affirmations, you can be
Mhm.
grateful, you can focus on your body and different things, but at some point you start evaluating things in your life. There's the exploration and evaluation that kind of tends to go on, whether you're conscious of it or not. Do you kind of see
Yeah.
that as true?
Yeah, exactly. And that's again the Tibetan word gom, I think, for meditation means to become familiar with. So we're becoming familiar with what is already there, right? And so at first you're going to become familiar with all these thoughts that are running around. And in time, when you start to create that space, you can become familiar with even deeper parts of who you are, right? So yes, you're definitely in meditation and spending time in your mind. You're becoming familiar with what is there by being the observer. I'm sure you've all heard that. Being the observer of your
Mhm.
mind, you're becoming familiar with what is there. And with that familiarity, with that awareness, you can then respond to it with wisdom and make those changes and make the changes you want to see in your life. Yeah.
So where can people get a hold of you? And do you have a website? Do you have social media
Yep. Yep.
contacts, things
Yep.
like
So
that?
so perloveformula.com is my website, and the links to all the social media there. Yeah, P.E.R.L.O.V.E formula.com. And again, there, if you sign up for my newsletter, you'll be sent a link to the 1 hour class. And most of my social media is Perlove, W. Holly McNeil. So just if you type in Perlove, P.E.R.L.O.V.E, I'll probably come up for social media. But definitely go to the website, sign up for the newsletter. And then once a month, I send out kind of where, any podcasts that I've been on, or so I'll, if you give me a link to this, Jay, I'll be including that in my newsletter. I also do one of the P.E.R.L.O.V.E practices a month. I go into kind of some insights and what speaking opportunities and the forum, what's coming up to be able to delve into these practices more. So yeah, perloveformula.com.
And what's like one final word you'd like to leave with the audience before we
And I
close out?
say, yeah, I said this, I said this already, but the biggest thing, no matter what practices, whatever positive thing you're doing, whatever mindfulness, whatever meditation, you must do it over and over and over and over again. If you liked what you hear today and you never listen to it again, you lose it, right? So, listen to any book, any teaching, anything you want to create in your life. You must make it a habit by rewiring your brain by doing it over and over and over again. It starts with 1 minute, 6 times a day. So,
Well, thanks for being on today. It was a pleasure to have you.
yeah, Jay, thank you. It's been wonderful.
Have you ever wondered whether the Bible was compatible with a near-death experience? In my book, Heaven's Truth, the parallels between the Bible and the near-death experience, your faith will be strengthened while you support this channel. In Heaven's Truth, you will learn about near-death experiences and other similar experiences in the Bible. Support for the Bible contained in NDEs, a central theme that runs through both the Bible and NDEs, how the NDE brings the Bible to life for these modern times, evidence for both the Bible and the NDE, and much more. Great book. Spillers does an excellent job weaving the relationship between NDEs and the scriptures. 5 stars on Amazon, available on Amazon.